Othello is one of the great Shakespearean tragedies, and as in the case of other tragedies, it ends in death. Comedies end in marriage, and the final scene of Othello is deeply moving. We're going to see a lot of dead people, and it's going to leave us with a number of questions unanswered. It's a very enigmatic play in some ways. I'd be tempted to view Othello as a tragedy pertaining to Machiavellian politics. And it's an examination of evil that doesn't offer us any easy understanding of it. Remember that Machiavelli says that a good ruler, a superior ruler, must be both a lion and a fox. A lion in the sense that he has to have courage and military prowess and be a leader of armies. And at the same time, he's sufficiently a fox so that he doesn't get tricked by people that are less powerful, but more clever. So Othello's tragedy is emblematic of what happens when a lion crosses a fox. It turns out that neither of them do well. The lion is Othello, the fox clearly is Iago, and Iago is in some ways the most interesting of Shakespeare's villains. To begin with, we start in Venice, and there was a war between Venice and the Ottoman Empire in the late 1500s, and this is set during that war. Another interesting set of problems and issues that emerges in Othello is the fact that it pertains to race and sex and status and public perception of status. So there is a lot going on in this relatively straightforward plot. So Desdemona, who's the beloved of Othello, runs away with him from Venice to Cyprus. And they elope, they get married, and Desdemona's father, Brabantio, who's an important political figure in Venice, is enraged that he has been ignored. Remember that back in Shakespeare's time, typically marriages would be arranged by parents. And that would be, particularly of high status people, that would be the norm. When Desdemona defies her father and instead runs away with Othello, her father, Brabantio, is deeply angered. He goes to the political officials of Venice and announces that his daughter has run off. And when these other political figures, particularly the Duke of Venice, finds out that she's run off with Othello, regardless of Brabantio's anger, the Duke tells him, look, we need him because he's a superior general. And he's such a great general and such a great leader of men that the fact that he's a Moor, he's an African, black, and he's an alien makes no difference to them. They're not interested in his race, they're interested in his military capacities. So Othello is a solid lion, and he's an honest, good-natured man. He is a genuinely heroic, genuinely courageous individual who has many virtues. And these are easily overlooked on the basis of the racial prejudice that the Venetians had. But you also have to remember that race means something different, and it's used differently at Shakespeare's time compared to the way we might deploy it. So, for example, Othello, because he's a Moor, is clearly of a different race. But the way English speakers in Shakespeare's time would have deployed the term, the Turks also would have been a different race. And not just the Turks. Englishmen in Shakespeare's time would often use the term race or different race to refer to the French or the Spanish. And they're not different in skin color, pigment. They're different in religion and language and culture. So the English form a race in Shakespeare's time, and Othello is far outside that very enclosed circle. But he is a man of superior virtue, and that's what lures Desdemona to him. She says that the reason why she ran away with him and fell in love with him is because he described the many battles he had fought and how he valiantly was wounded but fought on and destroyed his enemies. And that means, of course, destroying the enemies of Venice, as well as whatever other enemies he might have had prior to working for Venice. So what we have here is different degrees of people being aliens to Englishmen or to Venetians, all right? And Othello is the furthest removed, but it's not a great deal further removed than the Turks. And the use of race here is a way of emphasizing how different Othello and Desdemona are, and also how poorly he fits in to the hierarchy of status in Venice. So Othello himself is a lion, and he's a remarkable example of a sort of Machiavellian hero who rises on the basis of his virtù. He is excellent in war, he is fearless, and he gets the respect of fighting men such that he is capable of winning battles that might easily be lost otherwise. Now, at this time, Venice and the Turks, the Ottoman Empire, are at war, and the place where the fighting is happening is Cyprus. This is important because in Greek mythology, Cyprus was the home of Aphrodite, the goddess of love. So those who knew Greek mythology, and that would be the better educated part of the audience, would understand that what we're doing here is making reference to images or symbolism surrounding love. But times have changed. And now Cyprus, instead of being the site of Aphrodite's birth, is in fact a war zone. It's a series of well-fortified positions, and the command of the Venetian forces trying to drive the Turks out of Cyprus has been given to Othello. Desdemona follows him, and the action takes place in Cyprus. So the contrast between war and love is emphasized by the fact that they're gone to Cyprus, first of all, to celebrate their marriage, and second of all, to celebrate their marriage, but first of all, because this is Othello's job. He's leading a Venetian force, of which he is, and remember, he's an alien among the Venetians, but they respect his military prowess so much that they give him full command. So he is an eminent general, and he is an honest man. In other words, what you see is what you get with Othello. He's not a very complicated individual in the sense that his motives are quite clear and quite honorable. The match between Othello and Desdemona is a love match. Each of them loves each other, despite the disapproval of some people and despite the interference of some people like Iago. So keep in mind that the location connects both violence and sex. And this is not unimportant, because at the end of the play, we're going to see that Othello kills Desdemona in their marriage bed. And what that means is, this is again a microcosm of this connection between sex and death, between violence and love. And not only does he smother Desdemona in a pillow on their marriage bed, but when he realizes the terrible mistake that he's made, he blames himself and he stabs himself, dies on the marriage bed itself next to Desdemona. So here we have a combination, a strange connection of death beer and marriage bed. One gestures at death, the other gestures at life, because sex is the source of human generation. In this respects, it's well worth looking back at Sophocles' Antigone, if you know it. There, Antigone makes a lot of references to the bed and the tomb as being the same thing. So this crossing of wires between sex and death is a common thing seen in tragedy. And what it indicates is a mix-up or a confusion, or perhaps not a confusion, but a fusion of things that are ordinarily something like the poles, north and south, the opposites of the human psyche, sex and death. Now, Iago is perhaps the most interesting, or certainly one of the most interesting, of Shakespeare's villains. He is deep-dyed evil, and he is so evil that some people have taken him to be a Machiavellian politician. And he is in part, but he's a poor Machiavellian politician because A, he's a fox, but he's not a lion, and B, he's not clever enough to prevent himself getting caught. If you remember back the lecture I gave previously about Castiglione, that's a Machiavellian politician. He's so subtle and so clever that no one can actually see what he's done to usurp power. Iago doesn't fend so well. Instead, at the end, he's led off to be tortured to death. And if you remember that Machiavelli was tortured in the process of conflict within Florentine politics, that's what you want to avoid. What you want to make sure is you come out the winner, and Iago comes out a terrible loser. So in some ways, it's a cautionary tale, right? A lion without subtlety and without the ability to lie and pretend is likely to be harmed by a fox that fools him. On the other hand, if the fox gets caught, he doesn't have the power to get himself out of that jam. So this is to emphasize what Machiavelli says, which is that it's important to be both a lion and a fox. All right, now, this is the main theme of the play might be thought of as jealousy or resentment. And there's a wonderful line in which Shakespeare talks about jealousy, and it says, "The green-eyed monster which doth mock the meat it feeds upon." And the green-eyed monster as an image of jealousy is one that is most peculiarly Shakespearean, and it's a beautiful image because jealousy does feed upon itself. And once it starts, it begins to gnaw and grow and take over the person who is subject to jealousy. And that is poor Othello. As he says at the end of the play, he loved too much, but unwisely. And that's the problem. He was genuine in his love, and he's at the end genuine in his hate and self-loathing, but he's an honest man. Iago, on the other hand, is a man of dissimulation, and he also, in some ways, is connected to evil in a mysterious way. After reading this play many times, I've had a great deal of difficulty in figuring out exactly what motivates Iago. And that's worth some discussion. We'll look at that a little bit later. But to go a little further with Machiavelli, Machiavelli says that most of the conflicts between men arise from problems over women and money. And Iago is in fact taking money and undermining women in a way that guarantees him problems with everyone. He is unfortunate in that he doesn't succeed in carrying out his plans and killing everyone, but he is a kind of object lesson in how to get yourself in irresolvable conflicts with other men. And to get yourself into an irresolvable conflict with a lion like Othello is particularly dangerous. All right, now the lesser characters are very important for fleshing out both the character of Iago and the character of Othello. Iago is married to Emilia, and Emilia is a truly misanthropic woman. She thinks that all men are awful, and although she realizes that her husband Iago is a monster, she attributes that quality to all men. So she says, look, I'm doing as well as you can because all men are wicked and duplicitous like Iago. What else can you expect? It's not until the end, when she sees the difference between Othello and Desdemona and herself and Iago, that she turns on him, and then Iago kills her. So in some ways, the relationship between Iago and his wife, Emilia, is an inversion of the relationship between Othello and Desdemona. All right. One is the proper kind of love match. The other is a match between two people that show very little love for one another. The other characters are served to show us more about what Iago is like. Cassio is a captain, and he's been promoted over Iago by Othello. And it certainly seems like Iago is jealous of Cassio and resents the fact that he's been passed over. Iago also claims that he's heard a rumor that Othello had seduced Emilia and slept with her. And in some ways, his attempt to destroy Othello might be connected to that. The difficulty is that he says he doesn't believe the rumor. And actually, that seems like a plausible opinion to hold, because Othello is so forthright and straightforward that seducing the wife, particularly the misanthropic, nasty wife of one of his underlings, doesn't seem easily in character with Othello. So even Iago doesn't believe it. On the other hand, Iago is stealing money from a fool named Roderigo, and he previously had hoped to marry Desdemona, but failed and had given up on her. But Iago talks to him and speaks to him in such a way as to suggest that if we could get Othello out of the way, then he could have Desdemona, and then he would be much better off. So Iago plants the seeds of ambition in Roderigo, and he does it at a price. He requires that Roderigo supply him with money and jewels. And Roderigo, there's a saying that a fool and his money are soon parted. Roderigo gives him money on the assumption that Iago is his friend, trying to help him overcome the difficulty of Desdemona's matrimony. So Cassio is an excellent captain, and he is faithful to Othello. Roderigo is easily led and not very bright, and Iago plays them both. Iago talks Othello into being jealous about Desdemona's fidelity. He suggests to him that Cassio, who he resents, has been having a secret love affair with Desdemona. And this horrifies Othello, because while he is a brave and noble man, he doesn't have a sufficient degree of subtlety and suspicion about Iago. And more than once, he describes Iago as honest and true. And of course, the irony there is very painful to watch. So people that trust Iago inevitably end up getting hurt. Now, Cassio gets involved in a brawl, and as a result, he's demoted by Othello. And Cassio goes to Desdemona and says, look, I'm innocent. I'm nothing but a faithful follower of Othello. And he asks Desdemona to plead his case for him, see if she can persuade her husband to put him back in his previous station. Now, this is easily misunderstood by Othello as being a way of pleading for her secret lover. And Iago jumps upon that possibility and fans the flames of jealousy in Othello. So Othello thinks that she has been false with him. But then again, he's also deeply conflicted. He says, what evidence do I have of that? How do I know? So he demands of Iago evidence of this. Now, Iago goes to his wife, Emilia, and she manages to get for him a particular handkerchief that it was embroidered with strawberries that Othello had bought for Desdemona. And it was very unique, so he knew it when he saw it. When Iago got the handkerchief, he lets Othello know that this was gathered outside, not by him, but it was actually taken by Cassio as a token of love. And this convinces Othello that he is in fact being told the truth, and that in fact Desdemona has been unfaithful to him. Now, one of the things worth looking at here is if you think of the white sheets of the wedding bed and the blood that's going to be on it at the end of the play, that white handkerchief with the strawberries embroidered on it is a microcosm of that. In other words, this is a small version of the bloody marriage bed. And so what this is doing is foreshadowing the end of the play, when it's Othello's blood that will be spilt after he's mistakenly killed Desdemona. Now, Othello talks to Iago, and he says to him, look, we have to kill Cassio, and Desdemona has to die. And then you will be my new second in command, and you can step up. Iago agrees, but he's a coward, all right? This is one of the things that prevents him from being a lion. Instead of killing Cassio face to face in a sword duel, which you would almost certainly lose because he doesn't seem to be a great warrior, instead, he convinces the fool Rodrigo to attack Cassio with him. When they do so at night, Cassio stabs Rodrigo, but Iago stabs Cassio in the leg, so he's wounded. At that point, Othello, hearing the cries of Cassio, thinks that the deed has been done, and that's the point at which he decides that he will kill Desdemona here and now. And the scene in which she recognizes and understands his jealousy and his intention to murder is in fact one of the most moving scenes in Shakespeare. This has profound pathos. You can't help but feel bad for genuinely lovely, genuinely faithful, genuinely wifely Desdemona. She is falsely accused, and she is going to be killed by the man that she loves the most in the world. So Desdemona is in the bed and she gets killed. At that point, or just at that moment, Emilia is one of Desdemona's handmaidens, and she notices that the accusation against Desdemona is based upon the existence of this embroidered handkerchief. This embroidered handkerchief is, how can I put it? It's the thing that sets Emilia off. In other words, she's put up with a great deal of duplicity and a great deal of lovelessness from Iago. And she turns on Iago and says, you have stolen this handkerchief. You have made it appear that Desdemona was guilty. And in fact, I know genuinely that I supplied that to you, and Cassio had nothing to do with it. At this point, Iago kills his wife. He stabs Emilia. She dies. And Desdemona can't be revived. She's dead. And this is the point at which they find two letters Cassio and a couple of others make an entrance, this is the point at which they find two letters from Rodrigo. In other words, Rodrigo is going to accuse Iago from the grave. And what he says is that Iago has been stealing money from him, and that in fact, he is trying to persuade Rodrigo to kill Cassio so that he can have Desdemona for himself. This, of course, enrages everyone. In the final scene, Othello says, "I have loved not wisely, but too much." And then he stabs himself because he's an honorable man and he's dishonored himself. And he knows the penalty for murder. And he is not solely focused on his own survival and his own political advantage. He is also a man who genuinely loves. He loves deeply, but not wisely. And his death is genuinely moving. And when we in our mind's eye or on stage, imagine the dead couple who had loved each other in life, treating their marriage bed, the place where they have their sexual connection, as a kind of a tomb or a casket. It's deeply moving and deeply unsettling. Now, Iago at the end, because Cassio is, although wounded, is still here, he's going to take Othello's place, but he decides that, he's going to take Othello's place, rather. Cassio decides that Iago must be punished, and the punishment must be extremely severe, because it's not just fraud and causing death, but also theft and dishonorable conduct towards a man who is nothing but honorable. So he's led out to be imprisoned and then tortured to death. Now, one of the most enigmatic things about Iago is that he says, "I will say nothing." He refuses to speak. And that means that even when he's going to be tortured, what he's decided is that he doesn't want to say anything more. Words have been his means for survival and advancement, but now he has nothing more to say. He has cut himself off in silence. In Act 5, the last act of the play, Rodrigo, in his letter, refers to Iago as an inhuman dog. And that actually is a fine image. Matter of fact, there are a number of canine images there. But the point is that Iago turns out not to be a fox, but a dog. And a dog is neither bright like a fox and clever, and not ferocious like a lion. So he's something less than human. And that is part of the enigma of this play. What makes Iago so hateful? We don't see him as engaging in such duplicitous behavior prior to this. One assumes that that would have caught up with him too, because he isn't all that clever and doesn't cover all the bases. We get, of course, the mass death scene at the end of Othello, the way we get in all the great Shakespearean comedies like Hamlet or King Lear. And Iago is an enigma to me. I understand Othello pretty well. He's an honest man and a brave man who's fallen in love with a wonderful young woman. It's easy enough to understand Desdemona as well. She's a young woman who's amazed and astounded by the powerful stories of war and bravery and battle that Othello tells her. And that's what wins her over to him. Rodrigo is a pretty much stock figure. He's stupid and he's easily led, but even he manages to see through Iago by the end, despite the fact that he's dead before the big death scene at the end. And of course, Emilia gets stabbed by her own husband. So Desdemona, Emilia, Rodrigo are all the collateral damage in this play. And Shakespearean comedies, or rather tragedies, always have this mass of corpses at the end. In other words, in Hamlet, it's not just Hamlet that dies, it's a whole bunch of people. Same sort of thing with King Lear. Here we get the two ladies, Desdemona and Emilia, plus Rodrigo. Cassio is wounded, and Othello kills himself. Now, what could possibly motivate such hateful behavior in Iago? Well, the first possibility is jealousy. He does talk about this rumor that Othello had bedded his wife, but he specifically says that he doesn't believe it, and it doesn't seem like a very probable answer. So, I mean, it doesn't seem like a very probable action by Othello. So it's not a very good account of why he hates Othello so much, and also why he would hate Desdemona. A second might be resentment towards Cassio and towards Othello, that Othello chooses Cassio over him, and he feels that he has been unjustly neglected. That's possible too, but if he's jealous about Cassio, I understand why he would be interested in killing Cassio. Maybe his rage would be so great that he would want to kill Othello as well, or create the circumstances which would kill Othello. But why would he kill Desdemona? She hasn't done anything, and she's in no way related to his promotion or lack of promotion. So that doesn't easily explain his motives for me by itself either. I have heard, I guess, some time ago, someone make the argument that Iago has a kind of frustrated homosexual desire for Othello. And that's an interesting reading, and I can see why that would bring in Desdemona. The problem is I can't see anything in the text which really gives me any reason to believe that there's a homosexual longing on the part of Othello, or rather Iago. That comes too close to being love for a loveless creature like this. So not only is it hard to figure out why Iago chooses what he does, but also he explicitly states that he's never going to talk again. The idea being, I suppose, that we're never going to find out. And so where does this leave us? Well, it leaves us with a large pile of dead people, which is always the case in Shakespearean tragedy, but it leaves us wondering what motivates, what drives people who are as vicious as Iago. I mean, in the case of Othello, we can understand why a tragic hero would die. In the case of the fool, well, it's easy, Rodrigo, it's easy enough to see why he would be collateral damage. Anybody who deals with him is likely to be able to take advantage of his gullibility, and that does not bode well for his longevity. Emilia, the misanthrope, well, she dies not because it's necessary, but rather Iago is so base a criminal that he kills his own wife when she reveals his criminal behavior, and it suggests that he never had any affection for her. Of course, if he never had any affection for her, which it certainly seems like in the play, it's hard to see why he would care one way or another about whether she bedded down with Othello or not. And then, of course, there's the innocent victim, Desdemona, who's in some ways like Cordelia in King Lear. She's the innocent victim of these machinations. And at the end of the play, we can't help but have crushing pity for Desdemona, because she was an excellent, virtuous woman who was honest and faithful, and she was destroyed by a mysterious figure of evil that she never understood, and which even the spectators to the play are never going to understand. So we have the requisite large collection of dead people, but we don't have a fully satisfactory account of the malice that sets this play into motion. What makes Iago go? Why does he want to destroy people that don't need destruction? If it were some kind of self-interest or self-advantage, it could have been done easier and with fewer deaths as a result. And when he refuses to justify himself, refuses